everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. Today, our topic is back to school. It's September, so it seems like it to be a good time to go with a back to school theme. So topic is back to school, a look at future workforce demand. My name is Kevin Miller. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at Chmura and will be your host for this afternoon. Before we get started, tend to like to go over a few housekeeping items, just so everyone knows kind of what's going on. We always get the question on whether slides and a recording will be available, and the answer to that is yes. We will send out an email soon after the webinar, either this afternoon or tomorrow morning, with a link to a recording and a link to download the slides. So go ahead and keep an eye out for that. We usually have that stuff posted on our website too, right afterwards. During the webinar, please ask questions. We highly encourage participation with questions. The easiest way to do it is to put the questions in the chat at any point during the webinar. If there's something that the speaker is talking about that you want to ask about, just go ahead and put the question in the chat. We'll try to get to as many of those towards the end as we can. One thing with the questions, if you see them disappear from the chat, I tend to move some of them into the Q&A tab, just so that we can keep things organized for what the questions are. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Our speakers today will be Dr. Chris Chmura, the founder, CEO, and chief economist of Chmura Economics and Analytics, and Francesco Renna, who is our director of consulting and a senior economist here on staff. For those of you who might be new to our webinars, or for folks that have been around before, when we get started, we just kind of like to give you an overview of who we are and what we do. As a company, we provide labor market data and analysis through three main offerings: our Jobs EQ software, which we have a lot of clients on the call, which is always great, our consulting services, and then through access to that data that we do provide. We were founded in 1998 by Chris, who's one of our speakers today. It's interesting to note that we're coming up in December, will be the 25th anniversary of the company, so that's pretty exciting for us. We have offices in Richmond, Virginia, where the three of us are located, and also Cleveland, Ohio, but we do serve clients, hundreds of clients all over the country. As a team, we truly care about helping our clients get access to the data they need to help their communities and organizations grow, and really be strategically oriented with how they're using that data. Kind of the guide point for us really is to serve those customers with excellence. Excellence guides us and is always what we strive for in customer service and data quality. And we often hear from clients about how these two things differentiate us from similar products that are in the market. Just thinking about who those markets that we serve are. So the primary audience we serve are in 6 verticals, those being on the corporate side. We have a really exciting product coming out for corporate soon that we're going to be unveiling next month at HR Tech, if any of you are there. Economic development is another core vertical, education, site selection, staffing, and workforce. And here you can kind of see a representative sample of those clients that we do serve, ranging from major corporations and consulting clients through 2- and 4-year educational institutions, and then down to public sector clients in economic development and workforce. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chris to get us started. But really, thank you all for taking the time and joining us today.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Now we're showing you our weekly economic update. This is a publication that we put out every Friday, and it's something that we do for our clients. If you would like to sign up for this, you can go to the link or go to our homepage, and at the very bottom you can sign up. It's free of charge. And given the economy and how uncertain things are right now, this is just a nice summary that shows you some of the indicators that came out, what they mean, what the Fed is saying, and then on the last page, some forecasts and what the financial markets are doing. Just one other item before we get into the presentation is we are having a users conference in Orlando in January, and we'd invite you to take a look at this. It's at the Lowe's, Portofino Bay. And if you've looked at the website, hotel rooms are running somewhere around $700 a night, but we have a great rate at just a little bit over $200 if you're coming to our conference. Just some ideas of what we'll be talking about there. On the first day, we'll start out with an overview about the economy. We'll have an individual from Vision First talking about how to tell your talent story using data. Then we'll have some breakout sessions. And then in the afternoon, we'll have an individual from the Semiconductor Career and Apprentice Network who will talk about using data to drive growth in the semiconductor industry. And then ending that day, we'll have an individual from the Attainment Network talking about transforming education to workforce systems using data. So I hope you'll consider joining us at that event. Now getting down to the presentation here. First, we'll take an overview of the nation, and I'll talk to you about how inflation is continuing to drive Fed behavior. We'll look at some labor market data. The labor market's still tight, but we're starting to see it ease. And we still expect a recession, and we'll tell you why that is. And then Francesco will take over with regard to the look at the future workforce demand, and he'll focus on the Chips and Science Act, as well as cyber and generative AI revolution, what that means for workforce, and then green job opportunities. So beginning first with the national overview. Again, it's all about inflation. When will the Fed stop increasing interest rates? When we get down to that 2% inflation level. And here we're looking at two different measures of inflation, the CPI and the PCE. They're both at about 3%. So the CPI is what you usually hear about in the media, and it's a basket of goods that changes maybe every 2 years. So shelter, for example, or housing makes up about 30% of it. But the PCE, the Personal Consumption Expenditure Price Index, is the Fed's more favored index because the percentages that make up the things that we're buying change as we're changing what we're purchasing every month. So for example, if the price of meat goes up and you're buying less meat, then that percentage that's in the PCE will be reduced. And so it's a more accurate look at inflation. But at this point in time, both of the indicators are showing that inflation are way off their peaks that we saw a year or so ago and are about 3% at this point in time. Now I'm just showing you the CPI, and we could break it down into hundreds of different items, but here in blue is the total CPI, and again, you can see it's at about 3%. The black line is showing you goods, so a summation of all the goods and the prices increasing that you're seeing there. The gray shaded areas are recession. So notice right after we went into the COVID recession, all prices came down, but the goods prices started accelerating pretty quickly. And that's because we were locked down. We couldn't go out and spend on services. And so we were buying things like Pelotons instead of going to the gym. We bought a lot of Lululemon sweatpants because people did not see but the top half of us when we were on our Zoom calls. And you could see prices of goods have fallen now that people are out spending money on other items, such as going to resorts or hotels, airlines. And you can see the services price in red has been accelerating, but lately too, it has decelerated, but it's still around 6%. So inflation is coming down, but it's still too high from the Fed's perspective. One of the other concerns the Fed has is that this inflation will turn into wage increases. So back just after the COVID recession, we saw wages going up a lot more than inflation was. And so, inflation was going up a lot more than wages were, so people's real earnings were actually falling. Most recently, the latest data in August shows that average earnings are up 4.3%. So at least now we're seeing wages going up a little bit more than inflation, and so that's good for workers overall. But there's a concern that the Fed has, and that is that the wage increases can continue to increase, and inflation expectations becomes what they called unanchored. So as we as employees see things that cost more. We ask for pay increases, and when we get pay increases, then our employers will increase the price of their goods, and you can see that snowballing, and we are stuck in this higher inflation expectation mode. So the Fed is trying to get inflation back down to 2%, which is where they see is a good place for the economy to continue to grow. Inflation is bad for the economy. For one thing, it's a regressive tax. So people that have a lower income don't have as much discretionary income. So when food prices are going up, they have to decide, what am I not going to purchase because I have to buy food? Inflation tends to distort decision making, especially if inflation is going up at a very fast pace. We may start to accumulate inventory. If I'm building an office building and I need a lot of steel to do it, and it's going to take 2 years to build this building, then I may just purchase the steel ahead of time. But if during that 2-year period we end up in a recession, then I'm going to be in a situation where I'm not building this office, and we're going to have to wait until we come out of the recession for me to start to rebuild, and then I'm not going to need to buy that steel for some time, and so that will cause the recession to linger longer. And then finally, it can lead to a recession if the Fed continues to raise interest rates, and that's what we have been seeing over the past year, a big increase in the federal funds rate target, which has led to higher interest rates. So some of you may be asking, well, are we in a recession yet? And so here I have for you a couple of charts. There's a group called the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBER, and they are the arbiter of recession. So usually in most places across the globe, 2 straight declines in GDP is called a recession. We don't do that in the US. GDP comes out quarterly. The NBER looks at these monthly data indicators, and when they see a broad decline in these indicators, they declare that the recession has started. So here, one of the indicators they look at is employment up on the left-hand side. You can see that it is continuing to grow, although when you look at the last couple of months, the pace is slowing. And then to the right, you see personal income and consumption. We're looking at a percent change from a year ago. Consumers are very important. They make up about 2/3 of GDP, the overall economy. And so in black, you see consumption. So you have seen consumers slowing, and this is goods and services. Over the past couple of months, the increase from a year ago has slowed down. And in terms of income in green, you can see that that number, the percent gain there, has also slowed. And then at the bottom in the middle, industrial production is another indicator. So how much output or factory output are we seeing? This also includes mining and utilities. And here you can see that it had slowed about a year ago. And over the past month or two, we're seeing an uptick there. So we're seeing signs of some slowing here, but nothing that says there's a recession that's imminent. On this slide, also, they look at retail sales. And here we're looking at inflation-adjusted retail sales. The gray shaded areas, recessions, and notice in the 2008 recession that retail sales fell off pretty quickly as the recession started. Right now, the latest data showing retail sales are flat when adjusted for inflation. But actually, as we look at them, the percent change from a year ago, they're actually negative. So it's just slightly negative. So we are seeing some slowing there on the consumer side in terms of their spending activity. When we get to the labor market, here we're still seeing a fairly tight labor market, but some of those issues are easing. At the top is the unemployment rate, so it ticked up a bit. In fact, it ticked up in August because more people were coming into the labor force. That's good. That caused, at the bottom there, you can see the participation rate jumped pretty well in August. And that's good for the economy. We like to see more people in the economy working, and that would help also to keep wages under control. On this next slide, though, we are starting to see some signs of slowing. If you have Jobs EQ, you may have our RTI job postings. And this blue line at the top is job postings this year compared to the gray line, which is job postings last year. And actually, job postings are down 17% since June of 2022. So if you're not hiring people, or if you think your business is not growing, then certainly you're not going to be advertising for hiring people in job ads. So this is a nice leading indicator of the overall job market, which again shows that we are seeing some slowing. Another sign of slowing is the quit rate. So what percentage of all of employment is quitting in a particular month? The latest data here show a 2.3 quit rate in July of 2023, and that's actually the same number that we saw just prior to the COVID shutdown. So we are getting to a point where when there's more uncertainty, you can see in the gray shaded areas, people don't quit because they're fearful that if they take on another job, it may not work out and they'll have a hard time finding a job. So quit rates do show that the economy is slowing from the labor market perspective. So why do we expect a recession still? For one thing, we think that the Fed is going to have a harder time getting back to that 2%. Even though we're close at 3%, this last percentage point might be harder. The Federal Reserve met yesterday. They meet 8 times a year to talk about raising rates. They did not raise the federal funds rate, but they did imply that they would raise it at least one more time. Another thing is that it takes a year or longer for those increases to impact the economy. So we're just starting to feel the brunt of those impacts right now. Consumers are also starting to show some signs of weakness. I'll show you some slides on that before I hand this back over to Francesco. Credit card uses is increasing. Consumers don't have as much money in saving, and so instead of pulling back their spending, they're increasing by using credit cards. Student loan payments have started. That's going to take some money out of the economy, whereas these households were using the loan amount, spending it since they didn't have to pay the government back. And we're not seeing the federal stimulus going to households as it did during the pandemic. At this point, we're looking at a mild recession, but we're also looking at, for the next 2 years, the unemployment rate to increase to above about 5% during this recession. And from 3 to 5% is not a very bad recession, but still, anytime people lose jobs, it's a difficult time, especially for those losing their jobs. So now looking at charge-off rates. So how many credit card payments are not being made and banks are having to charge that off. You can see the latest data have increased kind of considerably, but if you follow that line back, it's really about the same as it was prior to the COVID recession. So the amount of increase makes it look like potential recession, but at this point, still by historical levels, it's fairly low. Another thing that we're keeping our eye on is a potential commercial real estate crisis. With all these individuals working from home, not as much office space is needed. Some studies estimate that there's 1.3 trillion of commercial real estate debt that will be due for repayment at the end of 2025. And these companies probably took out a loan at 3% for that real estate. When they renew it at 2025, it may be 6-7% that they're renewing it for. So that may then cause issues with the defaults. Commercial property price index is down 16% from its peak. So in addition to having to pay a higher interest rate, the property is worth less. And then regional banks are overexposed to the risk of commercial default. If you look at the bar chart on the right-hand side, the blue, light blue at the top of these are showing you the amount of commercial property loan that are with regional local banks. So that's an area of concern that we may start to see come up more in 2024 and then certainly by the end of 2025. But when we look at the charge-off rates for commercial real estate, so this is data from banks, how much they're charging off because loans have gone bad. Look all the way to the right, it's just inching up a little bit. Not a great concern. If you look at the 2008 recession, though, you could see how quickly those charge-off rates can rise. And then banks are also tightening their loan standards. So the Federal Reserve surveys bank loan officers on a quarterly basis and asks them whether it's easier or harder to get a loan. And as this number goes up, it indicates that it's harder to get a loan. That is, they're not giving out as many loans. They're being more stringent on their underwriting standards. If you look at the 2008 recession or even the recession in 2001, you could see how quickly the lending standards jumped. And this is the one chart of all of those that I've showed you that show a jump that is similar to what we have seen in past recessions. So again, a sign of the overall economy potentially slowing more into next year. And so as we look at our forecast, you can see in red, our forecast is for the economy to continue to grow at a slow pace and actually to see a slight contraction in the first and second quarter of next year, and then growth picks back up after that. So overview, inflation still remains fairly high, and as a result, the Fed will continue to keep interest rates high until we see it come down further, and we expect the consumer will start to pull back a bit more, and as a result, we're still looking for a recession in the first half of next year. So with that U.S. overview, let me now hand this over to Francesco.
Thank you, Chris. So as we have just seen, the 2024 is going to be probably a challenging year for the US economy. So it's extremely important that we play strategically in terms of the decision that we need to make for a workforce development. And in my section of the presentation, I would love to illustrate the situation of three sectors that I think, and we at Chmura think, are going to be actually the rough in the diamonds, the places where even if overall demand is contracting in 2024, we see potential for very large gains in the next year and probably in the years following that one. The first sector that I would love to talk about is related to the CHIPS and Science Act. This is a big program. It's about $280 billion program funded by the government, which is mostly focused on scientific R&D and commercialization, about 200 billion. But there is another $80 billion that is targeting semiconductor manufacturing and production. So we can have a tax, there could be tax credits, there could be subsidies to development of constructions of new factories, and so on and so forth. And especially there is a focus and emphasis on leading edge technology and wireless supply. Now, unfortunately, the semiconductor factor is not equally distributed across all the counties in the United States, but it tends to be concentrated on specific regions. But it is important then, to think that you can, as a community, how we can attract, how can we become more appealing to a potential employer to attract them and invest this pretty large amount of money that could help the labor force in our own community. So spread out across few specific counties, and in the pipeline, there are already pretty substantial projects that have potential for really making an impact on the local community. The one that is the most advanced is the Intel expansion of the existing plant or campus, how they call it campus in Chandler, Arizona. So there's already an existing plan there. And in 2021, Intel, by making use of some of the funding through the CHIPS and Science Act, decided to expand to two additional plants. They're called Fab 52 and 62. And they're close to completion, and they're expected to start operation in 2024. The total investment was about $20 billion, not million, but billion. So it's a lot of money, with an expected impact of about 3,000 high-tech jobs to attract into the region. In order to train the workforce, to provide the workforce with the needed skill set for these new jobs, Intel has actually cooperating with the local Maricopa Community College to start a quick start program to train workers toward these new high-tech jobs. In the pipeline, two more big projects, one in upstate New York, in Clay, to be more precise, by Micron. This is a very large investment project, about $100 billion, which a potential impact of 50,000 new jobs in the area. This is supposed to be, the goal is to create the largest leading edge memory site in the United States and probably one of the largest in the world. Even in this case, we do see an effort of the employer to collaborate with local community colleges to create training and opportunities for training the workforce in the needed skill set for the new occupations. At the same time, another project by Intel, this time in Ohio, just outside Columbus. It's another big project, $20 billion initially, but with the potential to reach $100 billion by the end of the completion of the project. The initial, so the amount of new jobs that is associated with the 20 billion initial investment is about 3,000 jobs, but that number is expected to go up as more and more money is put into the project. Again, even in this case, to emphasize how employers really now are focusing not only on creating new plans, but also developing the skill set in the labor force that are needed for the new jobs. We see a commitment of Intel of spending $100 million in a partnership with the local educational institutions in order to create the labor force with the skill set that is needed for these jobs. So a lot of opportunities for communities to create valuable jobs. I'm going to talk about very quickly about what is the potential impact of the Chandler campus expansion that is expected to start operation next year. As I said earlier, there's two new plans with a potential impact of 3,000 new jobs. So in order to derive what is the potential impact for this expansion, first of all, we need to identify what is the labor shed for the company, for Intel. Here I have a graph of the 45 minutes drive time from the campus, from Intel campus, which represents, the pool of potential workers that Intel can hire from. And then I see, well, these 3,000 workers, what kind of occupations do represent, okay? And so we see that of these 3,000 workers, about 424 are going to be electrical, electronic, and electromechanical equipment assembler, and so on and so forth. I don't have the entire list here in front of you. I can provide that to you, but I have the one that are in more demand. But now I need to ask myself, okay, if I need 423 new workers, how many do I have available in my labor shed in that region that I showed in the previous slide? And in the third column, we see that there's only 247 unemployed workers which actually have the skill of being an electrical, electronic, or electromechanical equipment assembler. So there is a shortage there because Intel cannot possibly hire all the workers that they need, given that there's not enough people with that skill set in the labor shed. So there is an opportunity now for people to move in this occupation and to acquire the skill sets they are needed to fulfill those positions. And what are the skills that are needed to fulfill these positions? Typically, electrical, electronic, and electromechanical equipment assemblers are just high school graduates, but they need to have very specific skill set. And what we see is that currently in the Intel labor shed, there is an oversupply of people with blueprint readings, and there's not enough people that have a reading schematic skill. So again, this is an opportunity for us to reposition ourselves in a way that we become competitive and we actually help Intel to thrive, and it's a win-win situation. So even if for high school students, we need to think about reworking the curriculum in a way that our graduates can come out of their degree, of their diploma, with the skill sets that are needed for the employer. And that the fact that there is a gap between what Intel needs and what is available in the labor shed is the reason why we have so many employers. They are actually collaborating and entering in partnerships with local community colleges to train the labor force in the skill set that they are needed. So if we go back to the list of major occupations that are needed to fulfill these 3,000 new workers, the first one, the very large one, is typically an occupation that requires only a high school diploma. But if we go down to electrical and electronic engineering, so it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the sixth line on this table. Here we have a situation where Intel is expected to hire 100 of these engineers, and there's only 14 that currently are available and ready to be hired in the labor shed. Okay, so then what can Intel do in order to, what can we as a community or Intel do in order to fulfill this gap? Well, we need to look at what kind of degrees lead to a job into electrical and electronic engineering technologist. And here we have that typically degrees in electrical, electronic communication, or computer system technology of system engineering are jobs that are title, are certifications or diplomas or skill set that they lead into a job or an occupation in electrical and electronic engineering. So this is another opportunity for a community to invest more in these certifications, because those are the certifications that lead into the jobs they are in high demand in the region. So it requires collaboration between employers and local educational institutions. Another big revolution that is likely to, or at least that's what people say, it's likely to dramatically change the workforce environment in not just in 2024, but probably for the next 5 and 10 years, is the IT revolution. There's like we always have periodically an IT revolution. This is also called the most dramatic revolution that we are likely to see, at least since the advent of the www of internet. And it's the cyber and generative AI revolution. Let me start with the generative AI, then we'll move to the cyber. Using our tool on Jobs EQ, the RTI, the job posting tool, well, we see that the number of job postings which require a knowledge of generative AI has been still increasing in the last 6 months. Remember what Chris said earlier today, that job ads are down about 17% from the peak of June of last year. That's not what we see in generative AI. The sector is growing and growing fast. The numbers are still small, but the sector is growing fast. So definitely this is a sector of the economy where we expect the demand to continue to expand. As a matter of fact, is growing even when everything else is not growing. So a lot of potential there. Why is this a very appealing occupation? Because it actually pays very well, which is an important factor to consider when you make the decision about which degree to pursue in college. On average, in the United States, the average salary of a job offer for a position which requires generative AI skills, it's about $135,000 per year, which is double the amount of money of all the remaining jobs in the United States. So a growing sector, not only a growing sector, a sector that pays very, very well. Definitely a future of workforce. It's looking much rosier in this occupation. Not too many, because it's a very new field, of course, there is not too many degrees yet that they are called, generative AI. But what are the existing programs that can easily lead to an artificial intelligence job? probably we're not surprised to see some of the majors here: computer science, engineering, mathematics, and computer and engineering. Those are all occupations. They train the workforce to acquire the skill set they are needed in order to perform your job as an artificial intelligence expert. If you don't have an AI certificate because your local university has not had the time to design a curriculum and to implement a new certificate in AI, what are the skill sets that are needed that even if you don't have a certificate, it would not take you too long to get trained to perform an AI work? Machine learning and Python. So if you are in school right now and you need to take a class, what class would be extremely relevant and valuable for your future opportunity as a productive member of the workforce? Machine learning and Python. Again, I don't think we're terribly surprised to see those two items, but it's always good to be reminded that that's where the future is: machine learning and Python. Now, let's not forget that there is another reason why it's important to be in generative AI, is because if we are on the good side of generative AI, we can gain a lot. I show you the salaries. Also, because if you're on the bad side of generative AI, you're most likely to be displaced by generative AI. Generative AI has the potential of disrupting about 25% of the actual skill sets that we currently have in the workforce. And the sectors of the economy, they are most likely to be affected by this revolution. That's why I call it revolution, are office and administrative support. Legal occupations are also expected to be impacted negatively by OpenAI. Architecture and engineering, especially architecture, are also very vulnerable to the expansion of AI. Life, physical, and social science, to a lower extent, about 36% of all the activities in that sectors could be automatized by OpenAI. And finally, businesses and financial operations. So we expect that the demand for these five sectors to actually go down, while the demand for engineering and specifically computer engineering to go up because of the revolution of OpenAI. Another important sector that seems to be growing in IT, and IT was probably a year ago, IT was on the downturn. There was we heard about a lot of companies laying off IT workers because they overhired during the pandemic. But that was a very short decline in hiring. Right now, hiring in IT is actually picking up again. And the reason why it's picking up again is, first of all, because of OpenAI and the need for more people with that type of skill set, machine learning and Python, but also because of cybersecurity. The sector that the BLS name for cybersecurity is information security and analysis. And as you can see from this chart, the sector is expected to grow by 3.1% every year for the next 10 years. And that's way larger. That growth rate is way bigger than the 0.6% that is expected on average for the entire United States. So that is definitely a sector that is growing and is growing above average. Another advantage of this sector, again, the wages. Look at what you have in front of you. The average mean wage in information security analysis, also again called cybersecurity, $124,000 per year, compared to an average in United States of $63,000 per year. So definitely a good sector to be in right now. And again, what are the skill sets that are required for this job? Information security, we're not super surprised about that one. Some other programming languages like Linux, and then surprise also some agile and project management skills. So that's another skill set that as a person in school or as an administrator of a school, we should probably provide to our students, because those skills are in demand right now and they're likely to remain in demand in 2024 and the years after that. So we're running out of time. Let me go very quickly to other the third job opportunity, which I call the green job opportunity. Now, green job is a big category. There's 12 sectors that follow under the umbrella of a green economy. We at Chmura have written a blog about green jobs, so I encourage everybody to actually go to the website and read the blog to have more information and details about what is a green job and what is a green economy. But I do not have the time to show the forecast of employment for all of these 12 sectors, but I'm going to choose 4 key sectors that I think are going to be important in 2024 and again the years after that. I'm going to start with environmental protection. And again, in the chart in front of you, the blue line represents the number of active job ads in RTI on our software compared to the gray line, which are the jobs ad from last year. So differently from the average in the United States, where we see that job ads are down, when we talk about environmental protection, we see that jobs are actually higher this year than they were a year ago. A sector that is growing. What kind of education titles or credentials are needed for these jobs? Well, environmental protection is mostly linked or related to 3 occupations. The first one, that is the one to your left, which is environmental science and protection technician. So as the name implies, technician, this is not an occupation that requires a lot of advanced degree. Almost half of the current positions are less than a bachelor degree. So we have some high school, we have some college, but we have also a lot of associate degrees. It's a community college type of degree. And it emphasizes the importance that community colleges play in forming the labor force with the skill set they are needed by employers, and they are in demand. Another occupation that is part of environmental protection is the environmental science and specialist. Now we're becoming a little bit more like higher degree, higher skill set, and we have a larger portion of the workforce that is required to have the minimum requirement is to have a bachelor degree, about almost 60%, and we start seeing even higher level of education, so master and professional degrees. And finally, probably the most skilled occupation in this sector is environmental engineers. And here you see that the need of having a master degree or a doctoral degree is almost fulfilling 50% of all the occupation, of all the job ads they are advertised in that sector. This is a sector that you have a lot of students that they care about, but it's also not something that we only care about. It's something that has a potential for growth, as pointed out by job ads. Another green sector that is in high demand is renewable energy services. And here I'm looking at solar and wind engineers, as well as solar engineering installation managers. So installation managers are going to be the lower skill set of the group, and solar energy system engineers and wind energy engineers are going to be the more advanced or the higher skill set workers in the group. Typically, in order to get a job in these occupations as an engineer, you need to come from a background of industrial engineering or manufacturing engineering or applied physics. So again, if you want to go into engineering and you're thinking about entering into these renewable energy services, the degrees to seek during your undergraduate would be definitely applied science, applied physics, or industrial/manufacturing engineering. For the lower skill set, for those who are not thinking about going to college and they just would like to still be part of this renewable energy services sector, then they can become a solar engineer installation manager, but they need to have a certificate or a certification as an electrician. So electricians are always been in demand. That demand is not going down anytime soon because of these new potential occupations for workers. Green construction is also another, as you can see here, an occupation that is going pretty strong. Right now, LEED accreditations is highly demanded. Last year, there were 3,300 jobs posted on our website that required workers to have an LEED certification. And we don't expect, again, there's no evidence in the current trend of a slowdown of the demand for workers with that type of skill set. So again, if you are an educational institution, make sure that you provide courses and classes that lead toward these LEED certification because they are in demand. They're not following the trend of being 17% below where we were a year ago, but we are actually above where we were a year ago. And finally, I would love to conclude with the last sector so that we have some time for questions from the audience. Recycling and waste reduction. There's a lot of demand about water and water waste management, both at advanced skill set for engineers, but also at the lower level of skill set. They require only a high school diploma as system operators. So quickly, let's conclude. What is the future of the workforce going to look like? Well, jobs are down overall, as Kristen said, 17%, but not across the board. There are still occupations that are growing, and they're growing strong. What are the drivers that determine if an occupation is growing or declining? Technology, the AI revolution, the cybersecurity concerns, especially due to the actual tension between the United States and China or Russia, which are some of the major cyber attacks threatening the United States right now. So technology, regulation especially, not only like, demand, requiring certain behavior, but also regulation in terms of the CHIPS and Science Act. So we need to take advantage of the opportunities that are available, the economic opportunities that are available, and how we can, as a community, attract firms that can actually leverage on this opportunity to grow and strengthen our workforce. And then ecosystem. There's cultural changes. We are demanding more more green jobs. We're demanding a greener economy, and that's going to affect the demand for green jobs. I did not talk about demographics because there's no time to talk about everything, but the demand for nursing is still pretty high because of the aging population, the graying American. We're becoming older, and so the demand for nursing is strong and will remain strong and probably will grow stronger over time because of the need of more nurses. And finally, business cycle. If a recession does happen, as we predicted, definitely that's going to shape the demand for workers, but that probably is going to be just a brief and not so severe recession. So probably nothing to be terribly concerned right now. Finally, remember to focus on skills, not just on certification on degrees, because some of these certifications don't exist yet, but you still can earn some skills that they become transferable to the new occupation. And we're becoming a very dynamic economy where things are changing very fast, and certificate may become obsolete, but skills that can be transferred to new occupations are going to be, in my opinion, what is going to make the difference between a winning labor force versus an obsolete labor force. And I am done, and we have 10 minutes for questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Francesco. Chris and Francesco, there's a couple questions. Some of them are related. I'll save some of the AI ones for a second. Going back to your presentation, Chris, about the quit rate, there is a question the question is, how can you tell the percentage is due to uncertainty versus retirements? And this is going back to that slide about the quits rate.
Yep. Thanks, Dana. Good question. The data come from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they survey employers. And so job quits are defined as voluntary separations from the employee. That is, the employee is leaving, and it does not include retirement. That's measured someplace else. So it's a survey, and specifically they ask who's voluntarily leaving your company and do not include anyone who is retiring. What good question.
Great, thanks. And just as a reminder to folks, we have a couple minutes left. So if there are any questions that you do have, go ahead and pop them in the chat or the Q&A. We have a couple more questions that are related to how AI will affect some individual professions and industries. Do you just want to take those as a whole, Chris, or do you just kind of want to go through those one by one?
Yeah, Francesco, can you see the questions about AI? I think let's go through them one by one because I think they are somewhat different.
Okay, so we can just start in kind of the order that they came in. So one from Kevin King is the AI effect on journalism and the arts.
Francesco, you may have your speaker off. Well, I see. Go right ahead.
No, you go first.
I was just going to say, well, we've certainly seen the impact on the arts in terms of the strikes with the writers. So that's certainly a concern. I don't think it will impact as quickly or as much as people think, at least in the short run. We had a nice blog that's out there that we had ChatGPT write an article about GDP a couple of years ago. We used a time frame where we wrote a blog about it. And so we compared what ChatGPT said and what our blog said, and it was good in some ways, but there were some errors that were made. So it's something that it's like, I suppose, for many years now, we've had the pilots that fly the planes autopilot, but there's always a pilot there. So I think it's going to be the same way with AI. You're going to need to have some human intervention in there. Francesco, any other thoughts?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I would love to say that maybe that's going to resolve some of those shortages that we're currently facing in the economy. So not sure if that is entirely a bad thing. That problem does not apply only to AI, but also to some extent to green jobs. For example, one of the issues of the EV cars is that they require fewer workers to be assembled. So probably this transformation of the economy where fewer people would be needed. But so we're not going to ever go to the situation where no worker is going to be needed. We're probably going to go toward a situation where fewer workers are going to be needed because the productivity of this worker will go up. But given the current shortages that we're facing, probably that's actually going to be not a bad thing for the economy.
Great, thanks. So the next one, looking at from an industry perspective, the question is, how will AI affect the warehouse and transportation industry? And then thinking about things like robotics.
I'll start on that one. You could already see that in our job postings data. So if you look at all of the job posts from Amazon, you'll see a lot of IT technology needed. If you look at some job posts from, say, Walmart and the warehousing of Walmart, it's more handlers. So the technology has not been implemented in some of the other warehouses as much as it has with Amazon. Whenever we go into a recession, that's a time when we see technology implemented a lot more because they need to make cost savings. So I would expect that the warehousing industry especially would be one that would be ripe for a lot more AI to decrease the amount of people needed?
I just saw an ad of the first Amazon store in an airport where there is no actually customer person needed, because you log in from your Amazon account and that opens the door and you buy stuff, and then somehow the store knows what is that you're buying, and you get everything paid on directly on your credit card without you swiping anything. So one of the things that we're going to see is probably customer service oriented sectors is going to be quote unquote hurt the most or replaced by AI. Not only in transportation warehousing, but also in transportation and warehousing. But I also could see it for any customer help support. It's going to be most likely not a real person that we're going to interact with, but probably an AI machine. And there's been studies that actually show that customer experience has been positive when the individual has interacted either with AI or with a customer, a client, customer operator that is using AI to facilitate the answer to the questions.
Great. We'll have this one be the last one, and then Chris, I'll let you wrap up after that. But the question is, how will AI affect the human resource profession, which is a people-oriented field?
The one thing that comes to mind right away, and then Francesco, back to you, is already we're starting to see some concerns about at least recruiting using AI, biases or discrimination. So there needs to be some care with regard to, I suppose, well, we have to remember that AI is being trained by humans, and so we need to make sure that the computer code that's created is one that is unbiased.
I was going to say the same thing, but besides at the hiring point, I think that the HR is going to be affected deeply by AI, because, at least in the short term, because the task of the labor force will change in the next 5 years. And people are saying that we don't even fully know the potential of AI. So, but what we know is that what we perform and how we perform it is going to change. And that, of course, is going to face some resistance from the current workforce. And so HR is going to be extremely important. It's going to play a very important role in this transformation period. So not only at the hiring process, but also for the current employers who are going to see their role change within the company.
Great. Thank you, Francesco, and thank you, Kevin, for leading this. And thanks, everyone, for hopping on and being here. And thank you all for being those of you who are clients, and let us know how we can help you more in the future. And we'll be seeing you in October.